Hi, I'm Roz Oserin. Welcome to class number 4, Saving Your Subject. If you'd like to learn watercolor and you're just a beginner, then these classes are for you because we are going to go over brushes, paints, watercolor paper, so that you'll know what to choose before you begin painting. I hope you enjoy the class. Let's get started. So this is the mastic on top of our lighthouse. We've just put it on the right side, a little bit on the rocks over here, and then down and in the water. And all of this part in the front is where the foliage is. This will end up being our light yellows. This takes a good 30 minutes probably to dry. So we're going to set this aside, dry. I'm going to turn my watercolor paper upside down because it will be easier for me to access that way. And I'm going to mix quite a bit of the manganese blue. And I'll probably be using a paper towel to lift some of that out. Doesn't really matter so much where we put the clouds. I'm going to begin by just wetting my brush and coming in and wetting the area. Carefully going along by my lighthouse. This side of the lighthouse is going to be darker, so it wouldn't really matter if I got a little bit of paint on that, but I'd rather not. And then I'm going to make sure that I get the water all the way around the top of the house here, or the building, because I really want the contrast. But I am going to leave some of this without any water on it, so it will appear to be clouds. And we definitely want the blue right next to the white area of the lighthouse. I'm going to let that sit for about 30 seconds. Whenever you can see the paper start to dull again, it means that it's a little bit too dry. So I want the paper to be glossy. Go over where I began, and now I'm going to pick up my manganese blue and come in and just layer that in. I want it a little bit lighter down here at the bottom to darker as I get up towards the top. I'm really going to get a lot of paint right now and drop that in. So I want the depth of color. I'm even adding a little bit of the ultramarine blue at the top. And remember that watercolor dries lighter than it appears right now. So we really have to be conscious of making it a little darker when we begin. So that it will be dark enough. So using the square brush really helps me get right around that building. And leave those little spots out for some clouds. Add a little more depth up here. A little bit of ultramarine in there with that. Let's turn that around. Take a good look at what that looks like. Nice and soft. I'm going to take my paper towel, lift a few more clouds here and there. Kind of softening those areas. I don't want the really hard edges. Soften that up. There we go. Soften this one right here. I'm happy with that. We're just going to let that dry. Step 2 is to go in and put the ocean right in through here. So I'm going to use the ultramarine blue, but I think I'm going to add a little indigo blue to that, which we didn't mention earlier. Indigo blue is very dark, as you can see, and we don't want it completely that color because the coloration right here is a little bit lighter than that. So we'll use indigo and ultramarine together and try to keep them separate as we go in and paint, and that way we can add each one wherever we want it. I always keep a paper towel in my left hand to control how much water I have on my brush. So I'm going to paint this directly onto the paper without wetting the paper because I really want it to be dark. So if you want the softer look that we have in the sky, you can wet your paper first, and if you want a darker look, you can paint directly. So we're going for that very nice straight line coming around. I'm going to go back up in here, get a little bit of my ultramarine blue. You can see the difference between the ultramarine blue and the indigo. And when you paint alternately with the different blues, this is some of the manganese. Just go in there and paint a little bit of each one. The manganese I'm going to put closer to the shoreline because in general it's a little bit lighter. If you really take a good look at the photograph, this is a little lighter around the edges. And I'm painting right over our mastic. And by doing that, that's why we do the mastic. Makes it so simple. You can just come in, go right on top of it. And then I'll go into the next, into some darker blues. Nothing wrong with leaving a little bit of white here and there too. Think shapes. When you're painting, think shapes. Like I'm thinking triangular, dark shape right here. Go in there and put that triangular dark shape in. And now I'm going to do the negative painting right in here because I know that I'm going to have some flowers. So I want this edge to be rough so that I can add in my really pretty flowers. Come in, I'll sneak just a little bit of that blue back down in there. We also need to attend to this little area right here and this as well. Okay, I'm going to let that dry. Then we'll come down in here and work on our rocks. Our foreground will probably be the very last thing that we'll do. Come in and work on our lighthouse too. Whenever you're deciding where am I going to paint next on the painting, you have to ask yourself, well, what is wet? So this area is still wet, so I'm going to come over here and work on the houses because it's not wet, it's dry, and I don't really have to worry about any paint that I might put in here going into this, for example, because it's already dry. So as we talked about, we're going to be using the permanent scarlet and also some burnt sienna to create this real pretty rooftop. If I find that it's just not dark enough, I might add a little bit of alizarin crimson. We want a little bit more of a brick red. We're going to add a blue to it just to brown it out a touch. Now I have to really take a good look right here. I'm going to start painting the rooftops. I'm going to start with the lighter. So this side the light is hitting, and the light is hitting right here and right here. So I'm going to start with those three flat areas. I'm going to take my mixture and just lighten it a bit and do the first wash. In order to lighten it, I'm just going to move it to another part of the palette, add a little bit of water to it. I made sure to paint this rooftop only when this one was dry. Otherwise, this would leak right into there and you'd have kind of a mess. Now I'm going to create a gray, a blue gray, to make the shadow on the lighthouse. I'm going to use opposite colors, so I'm going to use some of the orange on my palette with some of the ultramarine blue. That creates a beautiful gray. The orange and the blue together. If it looks too warm, add a little bit more blue to it. I'm going to start on the left-hand side. My dark gray.